All right. Well, I'll just do a quick welcome. I'm Kara Vaughn. I'm a Senior Training Manager with Noble, and welcome to our first Threat of the Month webinar. This one will be delivered by Randy Pike. We hope that by the end of the 30 minutes, each one of you walks away with the increased competence and confidence to respond to the Threat of the Month mentioned. Just really quickly, we will be delivering Noble Treks, which is our training and equipment expo. That'll be at the Gaylord National Harbor on February 22nd through 24th. If you like this type of training that we're delivering, we will be having 3 full 8-hour pre-conference sessions, 12 breakout sessions, over 100 vendors will be in attendance, and we'll have a full technology space where we will be doing live, ongoing demonstrations of new technologies in the CBRN and C5 ISR space. So without further ado, I will kick off to Randy Pike and start this month's Threat of the Month.
I believe there's a fine line between the technician and the human where you find a hazard and you find a heartbeat, where both of those things exist, and two people really with their split personalities. And somehow you have to convince the other just to keep going and going and going. And I believe that sometimes I found that line, and I would like to share a little bit about that with you today. Good afternoon, I'm Randy Pike. I have been a hazmat technician, and I'm not advancing the slide. I've been a hazmat technician for 31 years, 2 months and 25 days. Maybe the only CBRN guy that had his recruiter get him into the U.S. Army CBRN Corps, and then actually end up serving with his recruiter 6 years later. I have so much to thank Sergeant Major Pass for by getting me into the CBRN Corps. And then I had a few things I wanted to tell him about his recruiting brief that may or may not have been exactly true, but when I found him on active duty, he was a sergeant major, and I was just an E5, and I wasn't about to say, hey, I am not dropping Akatas behind enemy lines like he told me I would, though I did go to airborne school, and I really learned a lot about the Chemical Corps, working underneath the federal umbrella doing CBRN response operations. As you see here, I took all these photos. It's kind of the guy working the operations with his camera out all the time. And if you come see me at Trex, somebody's, would you mind muting whoever that is? I get a lot of feedback there. And I have to wear the headphones because I have military grade tinnitus. And when you ask me a question, I may say huh 4,000 times. So that's why I have to wear the headphones so I can hear what you're saying. But yeah, it took tons of photos. So if you come hunt me down at Trex, and I'll be there for the week. Plan on spending a little bit of time, but have your emergency text ready. Say, hey, you got to come get me away from this guy because he will not stop talking. Because I'll whip out the photos, and we'll talk about 12,800 coconuts, rolling presses and chop saws, and creating a no-joke dissemination cloud with a chop saw and these printing presses and 110 kilograms of pure cocaine that we found in a tractor trailer. I mean, I could just talk for hours and hours and hours about this stuff. And so I want to point out that I was a hazmat technician before I joined Noble. So we made mistakes, and I think it's important that we talk about the mistakes that we made in the hot zone so you can learn from our hard-earned lessons. And so the mistakes we made were in this role. And now I work for Noble Supply and Logistics. And this is our purpose. We serve you. If you wear a uniform and you serve your community, whether it be a global community or a local community and everything in between, we serve you with innovation, inclusion, integrity, and inspiration. We want to be the folks you rely on when the fists start flying. And we want to be in the middle of the fight as close as we can get, right there next to you, regardless of what the hazards are. This is kind of our breakdown, how we operate. We're all over the globe. We're a certified small business. You can learn more about this at noble.com. And I want to talk to you specifically about our cutting edge technology, training, and technical solutions in life cycle sustainment. but and how we needed that in the field, doing what we did. And I'm going to get down to fentanyl and tire rims here in just a moment, talking about concealed trap, access, evidentiary sampling, and evidence preservation. Our terminal learning objective, and I'm, especially now that we started a little bit late, I'm going to fly through my grammatically incorrect words. So if I talk way too fast and you're having trouble understanding me, Kara will definitely slow me down. So let me just take a deep breath and I'll slow down on my own. But yeah, I'm going to get you out of here in 19 minutes. So really the idea behind Thread of the Month, if you attend all of our monthly seminars, and we're going to double up the last few of the year, then you're going to get a certificate saying that you attended the 8 hours of Hazmat technician refresher for the year. It is free. And you're going to hear from guys like me that have worn the suit in the hot zone and really come up across some stuff that you really don't find every day, and get some of those lessons learned. And today what we're going to talk about is I want you to leave with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to identify what could be a concealed trap. Now, let's just take a wild guess. What could be a concealed trap? Everything with a void in it, from human bodies to vehicles to coconuts that you saw previously to printing rollers. If it has a void in it, it's a concealed trap. And we're going to talk about how we found those, how we access those, how we overpack the evidence, a little bit about reporting, though there's no real standard about reports. And we returned everything to its readiness posture, from tools, the environment, to our personnel. Conditions were always austere. It had been great to have power every place we went. We covered 1,400 miles of the southern border of the United States, and I don't think we ever had everything available to us that we needed. So we were always planning to work on the side of the interstate, to work inside of a air-conditioned building with a vehicle lift, which was magical when that happened. But have all of the, be able to identify all of the tools necessary to do those jobs to the 29 CFR standard. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, and how that applies to this operation, regardless of the uniform that you wear. So a little bit about our agenda, talk about wheel construction. These things that you see there listed on the right, and I have 16 minutes, maybe less than that, to get you out of here. So I'm going to burn through the next 14, 15 slides, spending only about a minute on, but if I'd be quiet, I guess I would be faster. Okay. And so in this photo, there's your agenda. I won't read that whole thing to you. And my 12-year-old daughter likes to say, well, not everything means something, but to me, it always does. And I was wondering, like, well, what did she mean when she said not everything means something? But in this photo, you see steel belted radials, and you see how this one's cut open. And could you guess how you do not want to cut open a steel belted radial? You don't want to cut it open like this, following this red line. And I am only speaking from experience. It will take you about 6,000 years to cut through that with a reciprocating saw. Maybe not 6,000, but it takes a really long time, and it makes a huge mess, and you'll never get the job done. So yeah, so anytime you see this rim, I hope you never do, but anytime you see this rim and you have to access it, well, you kindly let the air out, deflate the tire, and then you cut around the rim. It's way easier than trying to cut it like that. We were doing a photo shoot a year or two ago about this, doing some other training, concealed trap training. And yeah, our set preparer guy, whatever they call them, set person was trying to cut it like this. He's, man, it's real bad to cut these tires open. Yeah, and yeah, you are correct. It is really tough. So in this particular case, we got called, well, how do we know? And I was asked a year or two ago, well, what's the best detection piece of detection equipment that we have? And it's always the K9. You cannot fool a K9 ever. And so yeah, so this the K9 hit on this truck, and we took it to secondary, and we did a little bit of X-ray, and the K9s kept hitting on the tires. And so, hey, We believe this is another brick in the tire rim concealed trap truck. So we took it to secondary, took the tires off, and sure enough, some X-ray revealed these bricks. And inside, we found methamphetamines, fentanyl, and heroin. Two of the tires had nothing but pure fentanyl in them. And then one had methamphetamines. And then the fourth one had heroin, one brick of heroin, this moon-shaped brick, one brick of heroin, and one brick of methamphetamines. And so we broke those all down. And here you will find the material was 10. So this was all 10. The bricks were made of 10. And then the construction here, there was a ring down here that you see. Maybe it's in the next photo, but there's a ring down here. Maybe not in this one. But most of the time there was a ring down here that was built around the rim, and then they were welded like this. Some of the times we found these moon-shaped bricks constructed out of 10 just like that. No versus go, or go versus no go rather. We thought on the very first one a few years ago that we would cut the ends off of this one. That one's been nicely opened up already, but we would cut the ends off of these and we could pour out the drugs, but not the case, not even close. So what we had to do, because this is all hardened brick, you will see how they keep their form here in the next slide or two. And so what we had to do was cut along these seams. And we had some nice cuts here, but what do you think happens when that grinder met the evidence? You guessed it. That grinder met the evidence. If you remember the printing press roller slide that was in the first slide about me, maybe had all the drugs coming out of it. That was real exciting. When that wheel hits the evidence, it goes flying. And so not only do we have a weapon of mass destruction, we are now disseminating it, aerosolizing it, and floating it down the contamination corridor. And it was a real troubling mess. No one got hurt, thank goodness. I have the trash truck outside, so sorry, it might be a little noisy here. So what happened was we had to create a wind tunnel where we collected all of the air and filtered all of the air down past this. Now, we didn't have devices. We didn't bring in an equipment company. We just built it on site and really worked hard to stay along these seams with our reciprocating saw, with our grinder, you name it. So go versus no go. And this was far Texas. It was extremely hot. And we're in these suits and oh my gosh, I can't imagine how much water weight we lost in those couple of hours. Here we see this reciprocating saw. We have plenty of jokes about reciprocating saws because there's no shortage of these, and I just love sawzalls. They cut through everything, and I have them at my house to deconstruct stuff I want to throw away in the garbage, which he was just taking away. But yeah, so reciprocating saws along these seams. The grinders really kicked off the mess when it came in contact with the evidence. Reciprocating saws were way better, and they cut right down the seams really readily. And then here we were able to access the evidence and get that out of there. And have a better photo of us prying it out of there, I believe. And it came out of there in bricks. And so what we had to do, the problem you see here, here and here, is that this is all contamination. This is all evidence. And we had to clean all of that up. I have a really good picture, I think it's of the methamphetamines that leaked out of it. So we needed a way to collect all of the trash, all of the dust, all of the evidence that came out and spilled out, because that matters for the case against the perpetrator. Is that's all done on weight, and that's another legal class that I don't touch. But was certainly forced into say, hey, all of this stuff that you produce on the in the hot zone is all evidence, and we want it, and it's all weight. And but these things, if they were not narcotics, those were disposed of. But what happened? I mean, we don't have a hazmat team coming in. We had to decontaminate or mitigate the contamination on all of the things that we left behind. I have 8 minutes, and I'm going to cruise through the rest of it. Required tool set for us. Your operation is going to change and dictate a new set of tools. Reciprocating saw we used on everything. We used it on dropping fuel tanks. We used it on breaking down DOT pallets. And we definitely used it on these. You can see those welds and how we were able to stay on the seams here. A vehicle lift was a good requirement because this one was, yes, this one was we found another concealed trap on this vehicle. So we needed that vehicle lift. That made it way easier to get the tires off. Because if not, you have to jack that thing up, put it on jack stands. Yeah, so you have to really do some mission creep and have different tool sets to get the tires off and do the access here. Grinder, okay. We had it, we didn't really need it, but we used it. Evidence containers, you can never have enough evidence containers. And we're going to talk about evidentiary sampling here in just a moment. There's some really important points when it comes to evidence containers. And trained and ready hazmat technicians. We'll talk about training in just a second, but I just want to ask a little food for thought until we get to the slide about training. Is what course do you go to in the hazmat world that teaches you how to do this? I mean, this is all stuff that we had to learn on the fly. We've compiled it all into a nice training course now that takes a couple of days. I think it's great fun, but I also think that all of this stuff is really cool. And everything needs more sawzall. I was thinking about Will Ferrell there with the cowbell on Saturday Night Live. The joke's probably missed, but it would be way funnier if I was, probably not funny at all. Success, but so see all of this. This is all of the contamination I was talking about. We generated all of this trash, all of this drugs, all of these narcotics all over the place. Is all evidence. But this was the work that was required. And see how it came out of these nice, really hard bricks, not fitting into the evidence containers. We wanted to use these nice big drums. You can see how they were all cleaned off here, but a couple of things here. Success, but all of this has to get cleaned up because the canine that found this in the first place is going to want to come back and eat all of this stuff. Of course, we wouldn't leave all that behind, but even the small little crystals that you leave behind at the work site, that all of that needs to be cleaned up and verified that it's gone. Okay, you have to pursue to support the case, but mostly because they're both important, but definitely to keep the canine safe because they're gonna, once a month goes by, once 2 days go by, we're gonna forget about the case that was worked here. The canines will roam through there freely, and then they'll eat that stuff and they'll overdose. And yes, they die very quickly. Some of a real quick point about evidence containers. Be really easy to put all of this stuff in 55-gallon drums. But what we ran into over the course of the 9 years we did it is we have to use 5-gallon buckets. These have lockable lids. And the reason that is that we have to keep these until the case is prosecuted. That might be 5 years. It might be 6 months. It might be 10 years. These have to be maintained and kept in an evidence locker, which was not even here. I think it was about 100 miles away, which is a whole completely other story about transporting about $10 million worth of drugs down the interstate, which was not a good time. And then once the case is prosecuted, these will get incinerated. It is a whole nother ball of wax to get these incinerated. It is way more expensive for the government, way more work. So these small buckets we found were the only thing that would work for us along the border. And we had tons of these things. I hope it's the next slide. It is not. And I'll go back to evidence containers here in just a moment, so I won't lose you there. This one was a double dose. This fuel tank, we were taking this tire off, I believe, and we found somewhere in here a brand new clean bolt. And we said, hey, brand new clean bolt on the harness that kept this fuel tank attached to the chassis. This is a 20-year-old truck. We shouldn't have a clean bolt. And so we tested the fuel. Sure enough, it had methamphetamines in it. I think there was a concealed trap on one of these sides. And so we ended up dropping the tank, as you see us doing here. Yeah, you just had to get innovative. That's the top of a 95-gallon overpack drum that we just set that on because we couldn't get this back to the vehicle lift because it had no tires on it. And so, yeah, you just got to work around this stuff when you find it. All right, perfect. And I have a whole nother class. You'll probably see it in 6 or 8 months in this thread of the month where we talk about nothing but fuel tanks, methamphetamines, and the daily occurrences that is happening. And I have done something here. All right, evidentiary sampling and overpack. These always buckets. For us, that's how it worked. We needed to fit them through the incinerator. We needed them to be stored in a storage locker, an evidence locker that was triple locked, I guess, maybe quadruple locked. And so yeah, and those had to be stored, and then we get them into an incinerator maybe 4 or 5 years later. The problem with that is sometimes we found evidence that was still reacting. And what happens then is that this is the bucket, sorry for the drawing, this headspace gets vapors in it. This stuff was off-gassing. This headspace expands, and then the top of the bucket, the top of the evidence container will come off. And then all of this reaction is still going on, and these vapors are going to fill your evidence locker. And that's a danger, incredibly dangerous. So when you have them in there, when you have the evidence stored, you need a way for this stuff to off gas. Or you assign a team of 2 hazmat technicians with a backup team to go in there and burp these out if it's still reacting. And that's happened. I've seen it happen. Thank goodness nobody got hurt, but watch that very closely. And sometimes you can see the like the fizzing at the top of the sample when it's still reacting. Know that it's going to still happen inside of your evidence container, and this headspace is going to fill up and it's going to expand and pop off, and it may completely breach this thing. So, and I don't care if you have it in a steel bucket, you have it in a 55-gallon drum, you have it in a plastic bucket like you see here, that's going to fill up and pop off if it's still reacting, guaranteed to happen. All right, demobilization, I have 2 minutes. Working surface, evidence containers, tools, and personnel. Decon everything. We call this contamination mitigation now. Decontaminate everything, all of it, all the time. And then you have wastewater, and you need to go figure out how to properly dispose of your wastewater and give the ground that you just used back to your customer being whoever it is that's brought out the hazmat team. Now, let's talk about a couple of things real quick, because without this, it's not a hazmat refresher. You must have a site safety and health plan. I know that I worked on plenty of sites where say, hey, that's great, you have the paperwork. I'm not signing it. I'm glad you have it, but let's get to work. So this site safety and health plan, the components are in this 1910-120B. Make sure those are filled out. How do we know what the hazard is? The dog is telling us, hey, we got something. Detect-A-Chem. Fast, quick, easy. Do you have to calibrate it? No. Do I have to download new software to get it to work? No. Do I have to worry about sunlight? No. You just buy a bucket of them, buy a box of them, throw it on your truck, you're ready to rock and roll. Can I download and send reports? Absolutely, yes. And hey, call Matt, call Mike, or email these 2 guys, and they'll get you hooked up with Detect-A-Chem, and we'll get those sent out to you. Training and PPE, I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. I have 1 minute left, 2 minutes left. Medical surveillance. When do you have to be, when do you have to have a medical surveillance plan in place? All of the time. But when do you conduct operations? When they are hired or put on the hazmat team, once per year, upon exposure, or when they leave your team. Those are the 4 times you have to do medical surveillance. We'd worked a lot in a big program where we had to do medical surveillance before and after every entry. That's fine. As long as you're doing it those 4 times, whatever you do beyond that is completely fine. Record keeping, you have to keep those records, the site safety and health plan, the run report, your medical surveillance for 30 years. So you're going to go a couple of generations of technicians before you're allowed to get rid of these records. And so you just plan on keeping them. All right, training and PPE, my 2 favorite things. Employees shall not be permitted. So OSHA will give you gray, you have to make black and white. Shall not be permitted to participate until they have been trained to do it to a level required by their job function. I'm going to tell you, you will not go to HazWhopper, find concealed trap access and evidence collection in there. Hazardous materials evidence collection, illicit narcotics evidence collection. You won't find that in HazWhopper. Kind of our thing when we showed up to our first site was, oh my gosh, I had no idea we had to do all of this stuff. And yeah, that's a requirement. So create a training program, email Nick, and he'll get you in touch, or he is the guy to be in touch with when it comes to training. We have this really cool concealed trap access hazmat course. Anything else you want, hazmat, get a hold of Nick and he'll get you squared away on training and PPE. The hazards, the four most important words on this slide or on this side of the slide are hazards and potential hazards. What is there and what could be there? You need PPE. And hey, reach out to us at either at that email address or visit us there at that website. If you call me, I'm going to get you in touch with somebody that can get you the best PPE. And I'll probably bend your ear with all the stories. You can tell I like to talk a lot, and show you thousands of pictures. So if you call me, make sure you have an hour set aside, and then I'll probably still put you in touch with someone that'll get you all the PPE that you could ever need. Masks, suits, boots, gloves, you name it. All right, so I'm going to open this up to questions, but before I do that, Noble Trex is next month. Come find me. We're going to end up talking about all the photos on my phone when it comes to narcotics and concealed trappers. I was at the Ebola hot zone. You hear a lot, or in 2014, you hear a lot about that. As an incident commander at the Sonora floods, you'll hear a lot about that. So if you come find me, plan to spend a little time there, and I'll bore you with pictures. So questions. Who's got questions?
So Randy, I think everyone might be muted on this, but we did have a question into the chat box,
Cool.
looking to see if you or others have dealt with and bumping into fentanyl stash in a raid and it getting hit by rounds, flashbangs, demos, example being making it aerosol and implications, force protection, decontamination, medical recovery.
Sweet mercy. Can we break that down a little bit? First one was flashbangs. No, before flashbangs was what?
Yep, it's in the chat box, but let's just see here. It says, let's see here.
All right. Dealt with bumping into fentanyl stash. Yeah. So fentanyl is interesting. So if it's in pills already, there's only going to be a little bit of fentanyl in those pills. One of the things that's killing so many folks with this fentanyl is that it's not being made correctly. And there's too much fentanyl in the pills. But in a bulk of the pills, there's so little fentanyl in that pill, it is really difficult to find it, sample it, and identify it. So that's what I believe you're talking about in a raid, because we're collecting all of these tablets. We're trying to identify the fentanyl so we can protect ourselves, and we're missing it because there's so little in the tablet if it's made correctly, and I'm using correctly very loosely.
Jack, guys, this is Mike M2, and I'm the one to ask the question. And it has to do with I'm a military guy, and we deal with this now all over the world, all over what we call our AORs in our battle space. We now have bad guys, terrorists, etc., who are dealing with this in distribution, and some of them have huge amounts of it that we may or may not know as we go into and hit a house somewhere. What happens if all of a sudden we bump into it, hit a bag of true fentanyl or in any of its forms, and that then becomes aerosoled in the process? And how do we then look at decontamination? Now you have decontamination suits you got to get rid of. You're in a foreign country. You can't just leave it in the battle space because kids bump into it. You got to decontaminate helicopters. You got to do all this shit. You can't bring it back to where you came from in the process. So that's the construct why I asked the question. Over.
Yeah, M2, great question. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, so I'll call you M2. Great question. Bulk fentanyl's really extremely hazardous. It was used in a theater overseas and killed 130 something people on purpose. So yeah, now I am certainly not the guy to say that you can't leave it. Speaking from the hazmat CBRN side of the house, you cannot leave it. Somebody's going to get killed by it, and that's going to happen. So there needs to be CBRN assets that are going to come and secure that for you. do we have the training and capability in that unit to be able to come store it all, sample it all, put it in the evidentiary overpacks? That certainly, we have the assets here within Noble to identify the equipment required for that. The personnel, though, I don't know what you have access to, but I would certainly appreciate an email. So there's probably 4 of us that I'm thinking of off the top of my head that need to have that discussion with you. And I left one of them yesterday. I believe he's on the call today. Jay knows who he is. So M2, if you please email me, let's we're going to take a knee on that question. We'll put it out to the answers to everyone if that's available to us. But yeah, let's sit down and talk about that. That's a bigger deal than that I was prepared to answer as far as personnel.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Hey guys, I'll jump in for a second. This is Nick Del Rey. I'm the director of training at Noble. And Randy, great job, brother. And great question.
Thanks,
also, M2. It's exactly what we're trying to hit on our threats of the month, right? The training we deliver at Noble will not only make you certified, we know how to teach to the standard, but we will also make you qualified to do your job in a safe, competent manner, right? That's what Randy's trying to hit on here. And a great example from M2 and the question, the environments we work in, CONUS and OCONUS, are not always spelled out directly in 1910-120 or NFPA 472, right? Those are environments that you need to operate in with the critical thinking that has been developed through training from real world responders, right? I have a bench of close to 100 instructors, I'll call them, but they're really real world responders from military, law enforcement, fire, hazmat, who will work with you to teach you how to operate in those environments with the proper equipment, properly maintained. So that's why Noble is such a proud partner to protecting those who serve our country, both CONUS and OCONUS, right? We've walked the walk. Prior to my career start at Noble, I was the chief of the New York City Fire Department Hazmat Division for 12 years. We know how to operate in urban, suburban, all types of environments. I got a tremendous staff that can help support that. So we want to address those in our monthly Threat of the Month seminars by showing not everything happens, as depicted in a classroom or in a training ground. So great job, Randy. Thank you very much, brother.
Absolutely. And I look forward to you guys having me on again, whenever that is, in 4, 5, 6, 8 months. And M2, if I've copied your question. I'm going to forward that over to the guy that knows what you would have available to you. So please reach out so I can follow that up. I don't want you to leave the experience with a question unanswered. All right. Anybody else? All right. Very cool. I look forward to seeing you guys at Trex, you guys and girls at Trex next month. We'll have all of the equipment out there for you. We'll be there, and we look forward to talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Be safe.